We'll get started in about a minute. Good afternoon and welcome to the educational session. My name is QUarrington. I'm the Vice President of Traffic Safety and Driver Services with Saskatchewan Government Insurance. I'm also Saskatchewan's representative on CCMTA's Board of Directors. I will be your moderator for this last session this afternoon. The following presentation will last for about an hour or so. Each speaker will have about 25 minutes, and we'll leave about 10 minutes for questions. Please hold any questions till the end of the session so that we can handle those at that time. The name of the presentation is Mobile Driver License Technology. And to discuss this topic, we have a panel of a couple of speakers. We have Steve Purdy from Gemalto and Jeff QUarrington from Canadian Banknote Company. Steve is the Vice President, Sales and Marketing, NORAM Government Programs with Gemalto. Steve brings more than 17 years of experience focusing on business process, project management, customer service, and marketing. His formal education includes a bachelor's degree in marketing and a master's degrees in computer information systems. Steve leads Gemalto's driver license programs for North America. Jeff QUarrington is the Director of National Identification and Registries at the Canadian Banknote Company. In his role, he advises government on identity solutions and new technologies, including digital ID. He has a background in computer engineering and has worked in the secure identity business for over 13 years. Jeff is a member of several international and national identity standards development committees, including the working group currently drafting ISO MDL Standard 18013 Part 5. I invite Steve to start, and then we'll follow with Jeff. Steve. I think there's a clicker. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Well, bonjour. Good afternoon. First, on behalf of Jeff and myself, we really like to thank CCMTA for giving us this opportunity. This is a little bit of a quandary for me because I have two options. One is to speak as an auctioneer and to get through a lot of content, or two, try to hit some key messages and hope over the course of your learning that you'll have the opportunity to see some of the information that both of our companies have put out there to provide for education. So I've opted to go with the second, only because I can't speak that quickly. So what I'm going to cover is setting the stage for a digital driver's license, defining the DDL and the key benefits, pilot feedback and lessons learned. So we're going to talk about a pilot that we initiated in the U.S. and next steps for the pilot and beyond. So there's a lot of information on there, and what you'll find out as I'm going through some of the presentations, I'll try to hit some of the key points because there's a video I would like to share with you, and that video will show some of our participants in the demos that we did. You'll hear from jurisdictions directly, and I'd rather them talk than myself. So digital driver's license is really a multifaceted credential. It looks at the traditional use cases of a driver's license, how we use it today, air travel, employment, healthcare benefits, voter registration. Couple that with changes in the mobility behavior, using NFC terminals, using mobile payments, smart POS terminals. There's really an evolution that is occurring, and it's really forcing the industry to adapt accordingly. The potential for multi-application is really great with digital driver's licenses. It brings new functionalities and new capabilities. It keeps pace with emerging trends. I mean, you can see every day in your life when you're working with your mobile phone, there's more apps that are coming out, more efficiencies that are provided, more information that you can handle in a single second, minute, hour, day. The solution we found really needs to be device agnostic, so it really needs to be Apple, Android ready. And it must bring additional benefits in order for it to be successful. Healthcare card management, multiple credentials. So this is a platform that we're creating that initially establishes a trust in a digital format. And establishing that trust allows you to have a platform that you can expand into other programs within your provinces. When we looked at this several years back, there were key things that we decided that a DDL absolutely had to be. So the one is highly secure. That goes without question. It needs to be a supplement to the physical driver's license because, let's face it, as people start to adopt this technology, it's going to take time for people to build their faith and their trust in it. So it really needs to be a supplement because you're going to need to have your physical driver's license with you to ensure that you can prove your identity in areas where they don't accept a DDL. It needs to be optional and flexible. So again, once the technology comes out, you need to offer it as an option only because there will be pushback. So initially, people who want it have the option to get it, and those that want to stay with a traditional driver's license can. Privacy enhancing, this is really the key. And if you think about the use of your driver's license today, handing it over to a liquor store, for example, you're handing over all of your information. Why do I necessarily need to do that when I'm handing over my driver's license? There has to be a better way as a holder of a driver's license that I can keep privacy within that document or keep that privacy of who I am and only give them the information that they really need. Interoperable, as I mentioned earlier, working on multiple devices, and it really needs to continually evolve. Probably the biggest challenge of this technology is that there is so much possibility and people get really excited about it, and you almost have to pull back the reins when you're rolling this out because it's really exciting, and there are tons of possibilities that can occur with this. It reduces administrative costs because if you look at it for, I believe, everyone now, or pretty much everyone now, is issuing their credentials centrally. So you can imagine now with a digital driver's license, you can also issue a temporary document via your DDL as opposed to issuing it on paper. It improves customer satisfaction in the real-time usage of the document. It brings enhanced security to the identification and the verification process. So part of this is, when you go from one province to another province, you have to believe that everyone knows the security features that exist in another province. Where here, it takes the guesswork away. There's a verification process where you don't have to spend the time educating people who are handling and trying to verify the credential that it is actually a genuine credential. Allows for selective disclosure by the credential holder. So again, going back to what I mentioned earlier about using your DDL going into a liquor store to buy alcohol, all I need to do is show them my photo and that I'm over 21. Why do I need to show them any other information? Serves as a secure backup solution that's instantly available in the event that there's a lost or stolen physical driver's license, and creates the foundation for use cases that are additional to what we do today, which is really where this starts to get exciting. So if you look at things like healthcare, hunting, fishing license, concealed firearms permit, emergency contact information, it can go on and on and on because, again, you've established a digital identity platform that you will believe will cause a trust. And once you have that trust established, you can just continue to add application after application to support this. So for the stored DDL credentials, the mobile application, there's identity data, there's DL data, there's the photo, there's the security attributes, there's a signed data object, there's active authentication keys. You can see that this is just kind of a representation of the physical driver's license, but that is not where the security lies. Really, if you're looking at trying to add physical features that are available on your phone that you look at, you have to consider that as being non-secure because it's software, and software can easily be compromised. So the first is protecting it by a PIN. If your phone can support fingerprint, face, iris, there are additional authentication mechanisms that you can use. It displays, as I mentioned, the visual representation of the driver's license, but it doesn't have to be. It's just what people are comfortable with, and that's usually what we do just to show that it's really a driver's license. But it could just be, all the fonts and information that you need in a screen. It provides options to conduct DDL verification transactions. You have the capability to upload the latest status through a DDL server, and you can clear that information as well. So it gives you much better control. So what I mean by that is if someone is pulled over and they received a fine and they exceeded the points and their license became suspended, you have the ability to instantly update that information on the phone, which you can't currently do with your traditional driver's license. It would just display suspended or whatever you would decide. So during this process, and you may have heard of this pilot, we worked through a grant with the National Institute of Standards and Technology for a $2 million grant, and we pulled together wound up turning out to be 5 jurisdictions that we worked on, and we looked at 5 jurisdictions because we really wanted to look at interoperability of those jurisdictions collaborating together. So it was Colorado, Idaho, Wyoming, Maryland, and DC were the 5 participants in the pilot. And I should say are still the participants because it's still ongoing. It was a 2-phase program. The role of NIST was really important for us, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, because they were really focused on privacy. And for us, they provided sort of the guiding principles of the technology that we created. Because for them, they looked at it as saying that they did not want to give any additional authority to DMVs than what they currently have today. So what they actually did is challenged us to make sure that every transaction that we had to perform was an offline transaction, meaning that you do not go back to the DMV to do a verification process. It's done on your mobile phone. So by doing that, the DMV doesn't know that Steve has gone to a liquor store, has gone out to a club, or bought lottery tickets, or wherever I would be using for the verification process. So that was critical for them, and that was a non-starter if we decided not to follow their guidelines. So with those 5 jurisdictions, we had 10 different use cases. We had 20 live events within their jurisdictions, included grocery stores, casinos, live sporting events, working in an airport environment, traffic stops, working with law enforcement. And I can tell you that, and I hear it all the time, is asking how are we working with law enforcement? Are they receptive to it? Through this process of even before starting with the NIST pilot, we had to iterate multiple times because we were working very closely with law enforcement. And their message to us was very clear, which was we don't want to take possession of a phone. We don't want to add any steps in the process for us that does not exist today. And we want to ensure the safety of our officers. So through this process, we were really able to hone in on not only a technology, but working with their feedback to try to better pursue something that they would buy into. And that was really critical because out of all the stakeholders that you'll work with, law enforcement is probably the biggest. And what we found was that if you were willing to invite them in and participate in this, They were more of a partner in the experience. So I'm going to play a little bit of a video so you can see a little bit about what we did. How do we start that?
These days, we're all hearing a lot of buzz about mobile IDs, digital driver's licenses, and electronic identity credentials. But what does it really take to bring a digital driver's license from a concept to a reality? We set out on a cross-country mission to understand exactly that. Over the last year, we conducted workshops, held focus groups, collected feedback, and listened to the unique perspectives and critical considerations from key stakeholders and experts in the DDL ecosystem. We then refined our digital driver's license solution with all of that in mind. And now, we're hitting the streets to put our technology to the test.
Would you like to display your identification using your digital driver's license today?
I would.
I would describe the state of Maryland as very forward-thinking as far as technology, certainly open to review new technologies to make licensing process better not only for the customers, but also for the police and all other stakeholders.
All right, just wait here in the vehicle. I'll be right back with you.
And with a digital driver's license, if the resident lose their physical driver's license, their information is just out there. But if they lose their phone, it's not an issue because it's password protected, and then they can contact us. We can remotely just wipe out their driver's license. When they get their new phone, we can then remotely download that driver's license, and they're good to go.
From the demonstration I've seen and my actual use of the digital driver's license over the last several days, I believe it's something that we as a state absolutely need to be looking at for the adoption of it. I would recommend a digital driver's license to anyone who asks me about its appropriateness and ease of use and security.
The digital driver's license has 3 buttons on the bottom, one for TSA, one for law enforcement, and one for age. It just doesn't get any simpler than that.
Well, I'm looking forward to having a more streamlined, efficient process for verifying identity, taking away the human error.
No, I think they'll definitely take to it because you have the assurance of knowing that if the machine says it's good, it's the same database that the state uses, so I think it's going to just give you a peace of mind.
Each state's driver's license has a different place where the birth date is marked. Finding that can sort of be a haze. This does the 2 things that you want. It shows the picture very clearly and it says over 21 or under 21 very clearly, and that makes our job much, much easier.
Yes, we like to try new things. Actually, after working with it, it's so simple, I don't think there's going to be a big learning curve at all.
Your driver's license or your identification card is really your golden ticket. By putting it on your smartphone, just gives you much more flexibility.
Technology changes, and it's becoming more and more of our everyday life. For DMV to not be spearheading and leading that new way of life is really just a disservice to our public and our community. So we should absolutely be at the leading edge of technology.
Code accepted. That was fast.
There are multiple layers of security involved in this. At any given time when one of these credentials is scanned, it's going to detect if that was a genuine document issued by a state DMV facility.
When you start talking about digital information and the encryption, it's more secure than actually presenting a credit card or a driver's license in person. Physical cards can always be forged at some point in time. I mean, all you really need is the same printer that they use to print the ID. That stuff's not as proprietary as it could be.
The potential is just amazing and it's endless as far as reaching out to our customers and being able to communicate with them. It's one application across the board. So assume that this application is rolled out across all 50 states. It doesn't matter whether you're from Alabama, Washington, D.C., Maryland, any resident can use this technology. They can have access to their driver's license wherever they go.
With a digital driver's license, you have that extra step of verifying the identity to make sure the person really is who they say they are.
We love technology at the lottery. We're always thinking about the future and finding ways to make things fun. And speaking to the millennials who want to use their phones for everything, we're trying to look into the future as best that we can for our own products and fun games that can be played digitally as well.
From the tests that we're doing right now, I think that customers find it pretty convenient and easy to use. Everything's going on your phone mobily, and people are used to that in this day and age, and I think it'll be easy for them to adapt.
I think it's a fabulous idea. I think it
absolutely people would adapt to it because it's safer. Anything that makes your life easier and safer, it's got to be good.
We thank all of the jurisdictions and our partners who have helped us to pioneer this project. We invite you to continue this journey with us as we shape the future of digital identity.
Everybody gets the readers and the right technology to make it happen and make it a lot more convenient. So, yeah, he likes it too.
The first thing I remember is plugging in, an 8-track, and then all of a sudden there were tapes, and then CDs, and then I got an MP3 player, and then I just used my phone for everything. Seems the next logical choice. I think it's a fantastic idea.
Thanks. So you notice I wasn't in any of those pictures, so they never told me where these events were, and I would just find out about it from the video. So just some summary of the pilot that we have done so far. So there's been roughly over 750 participants. 58% of them described themselves as early technical adopters. It was required that we had a certain percentage minimum of Android users as well as iPhone users. They were normally employees or partner agencies or their families that participated in it because it was a lot easier logistically to do that. We required that they attend at least one of the events, and we really didn't have any issue with participation. And they must complete pre- and post-pilot surveys because the feedback was really important because as jurisdictions were looking at that, we wanted to make sure that we were providing the most up-to-date information about how successful these programs were and are. 85% afterwards said that they were very interested in the DDL option. 53% said that they were willing to pay for it, and the amount was $16 US, was the average. 13.5% said that they would, if given it as an option, would only carry that as opposed to the traditional credential. 97% said that they were more likely to use DDL technology in the future. 82% said that their opinion changed in the technology after they had the opportunity to use it, and that was positive. 77% said it would have, in this particular case, 77% said that they would have a more positive impression of the state that was issuing that credential. They considered some of the buzzwords were forward-thinking, innovative, exciting, modern, etc. So the next phase of this, so this was really using some of the traditional use cases of a driver's license, and what we're doing in the second phase, and we've already initiated that as well, is two different aspects. So one on the left is the authentication for online services, and the one on the right is selective online attribute sharing. So really, what does that mean? So we talked about displaying your DDL and presenting whether you're over or under 21 in your photo. But let's transform that and make that even more digital. So being able to pre-fill forms using your DDL to actually, as you're doing some of that pre-filling, to authenticate yourself using the DDL. So you have much more interaction with your phone, and the great thing about it is that you've already verified through your processes that this person is who they say they are. So by doing that, you've now established that trust, and now you can take the traditional use cases and actually put them online. And it'll give you a much greater degree of confidence than what you would have not knowing who's actually in front of you. So it was really a team effort, a real collaboration. So it was working with the AMVA MDL working group. We worked very closely with them and giving them an idea of what we were doing and exchanging detailed information about how we were managing security, the different use cases that we were testing, the feedback we received, and working with them to see what their direction and guidelines were, and ensuring that we were collaborating throughout. ISO WG10, so this is a worldwide standard. So the The things that we're doing are slightly different than what ISO is doing, but what we're doing is having a significant impact to where we think globally this will go. And then, as I mentioned, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, their Trusted Identity Group has been really a fantastic partner for us in helping ensure that we're looking after citizen privacy and providing the assurances on the security aspects. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jeff. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and just echo Steve, thank you very much for having us here today and giving us an opportunity to talk about MDL. For those of you that don't know, MDL all sort of started back in 2015 when Iowa had announced that they were going to launch a pilot for MDL that is allowing their residents to assert their driving license attributes or portray their driver's license through the use of their mobile phone. This thing took off like wildfire and became mainstream media. It had been published articles in Wired magazine, it had become on Good Morning America and syndicated TV across the US. And through that really kind of captured the attention of motor vehicle administrators across North America and across the world. And from that point on, we saw a number of activities started and initiated by the motor vehicle administrators, including pilots and proof of concepts, of course starting with Iowa. They had launched a pilot using their own DMV employees to test technology and process. We launched a proof of concept with our partner in Virginia, which was the first proof of concept or pilot that allowed live transactions using live data to conduct real-time transactions to obtain alcohol, gaming, and tobacco products. From there, we've continued to see announcements of additional pilots and proof of concepts, the list of them kind of here at the bottom left. We saw a number of jurisdictions that started launching formal investigations into the technology. Those are listed here at the top right. Those were formal mandated studies to go and learn about technology, process, market research, pricing, et cetera. And then from there, we haven't seen really an RFP that's been published in this area that hasn't asked for some details on MDL programs or digital identification programs in general. Across the world, we've seen a number of pilots being announced or production rollouts really announced. In Finland, for example, they're going to be launching an MDL program that's production. We are seeing New South Wales and Australia announce their intentions to launch a mobile driver's license program as well. And of course, standards are being drafted. So part of the ISO work that's going on right now are drafting standards. So through that, over the last 3 years, really, we're starting to learn a number of things, and there's been some valuable insights that we've taken on, which I want to share with you today, and then go after that into a little bit of detail about the proof of concept that we did with Virginia. The first thing is that we need a pragmatic approach to MDL programs. The term MDL itself is a bit ambiguous. It's open to a lot of different definitions and interpretations. For some jurisdictions, it's about replacement of the physical license in the narrowest sense. So how we use our physical license today, it's a direct replication of that, just in a mobile format. Others are thinking more broadly. As we talk to jurisdictions and even different people within the same jurisdiction, we're getting different results, different definitions. Some see it as a possibility to do things like temporary driver license issuance. So in a central issuance environment, allow them to issue an MDL instead of a paper format to carry them through till they get their physical license. Other jurisdictions see it as a way for emergency driver's license issuance. Allow them to connect with their customers, allow them to issue their driver's license in an instance in order to allow them to do things like deliver social benefit or need. Take, for example, Fort McMurray, when all the people were displaced, people carried their mobile phones, a lot of people left their wallets behind. It would have been great if we had the ability to enable them to issue their driver's license and connect with them and support them with the need that they needed. Other jurisdictions are looking at it as a way to extend their digital ID strategies, their mobile strategies. This is particularly relevant in Canada as it relates to the Pan-Canadian Federated Identity Strategy. For those of you that aren't aware with that, it's about allowing jurisdictions and agencies within jurisdictions to assert identity on their residents to other jurisdictions and to the federal government. A number of governments see this playing a particularly important role as a platform that will allow people to have a consistent experience in asserting their identity online as well as in person, and providing the consistent experience for consent as it relates to verified persons and verified consent and verified login conformance criteria. Number two is that stakeholder requirements is extremely important. If people are going to be accepting of the mobile driver's license, we need to make sure that the technology and the process for the MDL is congruent with their operational environment. And perhaps outside of law enforcement, we really don't understand the business of those businesses very well. Think about all the places you use your driver's license, whether it's renting a car, car sharing, voter check-in, as Steve said, the list goes on. If we're going to expect those people to accept an MDL, we have to understand their business to ensure that it's going to work for them. And if we think about other cases that we may be using an MDL online, these are all new avenues for which we have to understand an in-depth understanding of the business in order for us to draft a process. This is particularly important why proof of concepts and pilots are critical to us understanding and developing these solutions. Because together, with our I guess competition and with organizations and with our customers, we're building and continuing to learn and understand how an MDL can play a role and what's the right process. And so that iterative learning is really allowing us to grow our understanding of MDL space. The third thing is that the value proposition and the business model is not very well understood. If you take a look at the value proposition, it has to really provide benefit to three groups. It has to provide benefit to the DMV that's issuing it, the jurisdiction that's issuing it. It needs to provide benefit to those people that are going to accept it. And it needs to provide value to the customer. On the customer side, I think there's always been this theory of that convenience and privacy enhancements is going to be enough to bring them to the table and have them to want to subscribe or pay for an MDL. What we're learning from the proof of concepts and pilots is that the participation rates are fairly low. Steve talked about 750 people across the 5 pilots. We had 250 in ours, and some of the other pilots have much less. What we don't know at this point is whether the low participation rates are as a result of people there's not enough interest, the pilot scope is too small, or if it's because the processes and technologies, the way that we've designed them, is enough to attract them or make it work for them in their everyday business or use. The second thing is the people that are accepting the driver's license, the benefit and value proposition for them is even fuzzier. The reality is that there's a free version of identification in the pocket. So in order to entice them to invest and spend, in order to accept an MDL, and there's costs there, there's costs associated with investing in technology, whether it be readers or back-end or updating their systems to accept one, costs associated with training, maintenance and support. If they're going to invest into those technologies and pay those costs, they're going to need to see greater value and benefit in accepting the MDL. And then the third, from the DMV's perspective, or motor vehicle administrative perspective, there's this thought that, well, if we're issuing MDLs, it's going to be a cost savings feature because we're not going to have to issue these physical cards and these physical licenses. In the immediate, short to foreseeable future, that's not a likely scenario because, as Steve mentioned, this is going to be an augmentation to the physical license. So jurisdictions will need to continue to issue a physical license, and this will be an investment on top of that. So we brought some of those learnings and brought them to Virginia. And the first thing that we sat down with them is we said, what would you like to get from an MDL program? What does it mean for you? What are the benefits that you like to get from it? How would you like to see it work? And here's what we gathered from the input from Virginia DMV. Number one is that they want to be the central provider and the person on contact. They didn't want to work through an intermediary. They didn't want someone opening up an app that's not Virginia DMV, trying to enroll in an MDL and have it use it without the involvement of Virginia DMV. They want to be front and center, and they wanted everything to be branded with Virginia DMV on it. Second was, Virginia had always been a leader in the space of digital ID. They had stepped out on an NSTIC pilot, the very first round of NSTIC grants, to build a platform that would allow users and customers of Virginia DMV to use their data to allow them to be asserted to other services online, particularly in the healthcare market space. So they would be able to use their proven and trusted data that DMV has on them to assert their identity to other jurisdictions and other data sources and applications and allow them to assert those attributes. They wanted an MDL that would align with that and support that platform. Third, they had the idea that this thing needs to work with current infrastructure within each of the various people that were going to accept it. And they wanted something that was going to work across the different platforms that people have, Android, Windows, Apple. I don't think BlackBerry was much around at the point we started this either, even less so today. But it needed to work across all the different platforms, and they wanted something that was going to allow them to be able to rapidly deploy changes as they conducted the pilot over 3 months. And then lastly, they needed this thing to be equally secure, if not more secure than the physical license, and provide privacy enhancements over and above what they had today. So the next thing we did is that we engaged the stakeholder community within Virginia. So we worked with a number of people from law enforcement, eight law enforcement agencies, including state and a number of local policing agencies within Richmond and the area. We worked with people that were representing the convenience and gas station industry group. We had a number of people representing particular retail shops, brewers, restaurants, come in and talk with us. We did a number of kind of schoolroom setting, classroom settings where we had talked about MDL, understood from them what they'd like to have from MDL, what potential benefits they see, some of the constraints that they think they may have. And then from there we went out and we did a number of site visits to try to understand, okay, well, what type of environment are we needing to work within in order to produce an MDL that's going to work? We did a number of sitting in police cruisers. The 8 different police cruisers we sat in, had a look at their equipment and so on. And I did a ride-along with Richmond Police overnight, which was incredibly insightful. It really gave us a perspective as to what the environment is for which they work in. And I think the key learning from the ride-along is I learned, we talked about roadside stop use case as one use case, but it's really a number of use cases. Pulling someone over in the middle of the night in an urban setting in an open carry state is very different than pulling over a commercial driver off the highway in a safe environment. Those are completely different things. Other things we learned with law enforcement, they had a number of constraints. One is they couldn't have any more devices on them. Their belt already weighs a ton of weight, and they couldn't add anything else on it. They couldn't add anything else inside the vehicle either. The equipment that already exists in the police cruisers are already reaching the limit of electromagnetic radiation. So they can't absolutely have anything else that's in there. We've got to make use of what's in there. And the other thing that we learned too is that the infrastructure, the equipment that they have from police car to police car, or within agency to agency, I should say, was very different. Some had 2D barcode scans or guns. They connected to a back end of one provided by one company, which was different from another. So as you build an MDL platform, you need to build so that it's going to be usable and attainable from all the different policing agencies and all the different equipment that they have and all the different infrastructure they have, and not just thinking about it as just one. Benefits that we learned from the law enforcement, they saw that if we can know who's in the vehicle before we approach it, that would be useful, allow us to assess the situation before we approach the side of the car. And anything that would speed along a roadside stop or in any infraction, whether it be an accident, for example. The longer that a police officer is at the side of a road, the more likely he is going to be hit by a car passing by, or increases the odds of another accident happening from people driving by and rubbernecking. So the idea was if we could take the MDL and facilitate the transaction that's taking place in order to get the law enforcement officer on his way, the quicker, the better, and that would provide that benefit. From within the convenience stores, some of the constraints that we learned is that it couldn't increase the time that it takes to conduct a transaction. So, you take the sense of I'm taking this physical card, I'm taking a look at it, trying to do the calculation of whether they're of age or not, and hand it back. Well, it needs to be that quick. We can't take longer to use the MDL in order to conduct the transaction, building up the lines. The other thing is that it was varied environments. Some convenience stores was open and had a counter that was full of space. Others were, depending on the time of night, was behind bulletproof glass. So we had to conduct and build something that was going to work in those environments. They had seen potential benefit in the MDL in way of a larger photo for identification purposes, being able to draw the comparison of the person that's in front of them to the MDL, as well as auto-populating or auto-calculating whether they're of age, 18 or 21. I mean, one of the funny things, though, in the proof of concept, which I'll talk to in a minute, we display this big photo of someone and we display whether they're 18 or 21 with big X's or green check marks. And we found during the pilot, people were still selling underage people with alcohol. So that brought us to the Virginia proof of concept. The way this works is that it's a web-based application for those of you that are technical in the crowd. And the reason we did that is that allowed us to deploy something quickly without having to deal with the Apple and the Android stores. What you see here on the screen at the top right is the application that the MDL holder had in their hand. And they would open up the application and they would select a profile of information from the bottom, so whether it be law enforcement, which would then disclose to the person that's accepting it full details of the person, or age verification, which would display just the photograph and whether they're of age of 21 or 18. What you see at the top right, the QR code, if you swiped it to the right, you would see the information that was being shared. This is this idea of easy to consume knowledge of the attributes I'm sharing, consent, before I'm sharing that information. With the QR code, they then displayed that to a tablet. For the proof of concept, we outfitted, there were 17 participants, including brewers, restaurants, the SAQ, sorry, that's here. The ABC, the Alcohol Beverage and Control, which is similar to the SAQ, that control sales of hard liquor and particular wines, and they also had storefronts. So they had a tablet that was displayed on their countertop that the MDL holder would display the QR code to, read the QR code, go get the information from the backend from the Virginia database, and display that onto the screen. The reason we picked the QR code and the way that we set that up was that we would, the idea is that this would be consumable by infrastructure that already existed. Point of sales terminals already have 2D barcodes, guns largely. Lottery terminals have 2D barcode capability. So the thought was they'd scan the QR code, it'd go get the data and then bring it back. For the proof of concept, not requiring anyone to go and spend money on their backend systems, the tablet was used as a stopgap measure. So that data was then displayed to the operator, allowing that person to go ahead and purchase the age-restricted materials. So as I said, this was a real-time proof of concept at 17 sites. 250 users had signed up for it and allowed them to go and purchase alcohol, tobacco, or gaming products at these sites just using their MDL. The other use case that we explored with Virginia DMV that they wanted to explore was law enforcement roadside stop use case. Well, we'd like to have done something in a live setting. The reality is, in order to get enough frequency and get enough data from it, we would have to outfit a huge number of officers. If you think about just the number of times you get pulled over, it's fairly low. So what we did instead is we did a staged event with the law enforcement community. So we set up in the back parking lot of the DMV, a roadside stop use case setting. We invited all the law enforcement communities that we had dealt with, so the 8 of them, plus Virginia DMV has their own law enforcement, so they came out as well. And we set up that staged event in the backyard and conducted a study. For the law enforcement, we ran 2 different technologies. One of the things that we learned is that they like choice. So we ran it the way as I just talked about it, where the DMV, the consumer or customer would have their QR code, and the law enforcement officer would walk over, take their device, read the data, or read the QR code, and then compare the data beside the car. One of the, I think for those of you that are in the MDL or following MDL, I've heard is that officers don't want to have to carry something or have something in their hand because they have to have a flashlight and they have to have their other hand that's ready to pull out their weapon. So while some officers like that idea and having that choice, we also piloted another technology, which was when someone was pulled over, they could open up their application and they could flick on that they've been pulled over, and a back-end service would co-locate the police vehicle and the person that's being pulled over and then transfer the information. So 2 vehicles, the law enforcement and the person, the MDL holder, has turned on their beacon, found the 2, co-located them, and then required consent from the MDL holder, of course, but then broadcasted the information back to the police cruiser. The idea there is that some of the constraint, or one of the constraints there, was that we needed to be able to do it quickly. Law enforcement community largely has been instructed that when they pull a vehicle over, that they need to get out of the vehicle as soon as possible in order to take control of the situation and assess it. So we had this 10-second window that had been prescribed to us, which it worked. Within the 10 seconds, it provided that information. Again, now technology here and in a controlled setting seems to work. But in reality, as we know, as you go out and you get pulled over, IQ drops a little bit and you're trying to log into your application, can't remember your PIN, things get a little bit stressful pretty quick. So don't know if that would work in a real-time situation. The other thing too is that, this is particularly true in the United States, is that it's a very stressful environment when someone's being pulled over. The climate is quite stressed, and a lot of people are instructed just to leave their hands on the steering wheel, not reaching into a purse or reaching into a glove box or looking for the phone. So will this work for law enforcement? Don't know. Law enforcement, I think, largely has stepped out and said they want to be in the conversation of MDL right now. They don't want to be forced something down the path for which they've had no input. But they're likely not early adopters of the technology, not outright anyways. And that they will have the choice to always ask for a physical license, and it'll probably be some time before they accept the mobile driver's license. Just a little bit of pilot feedback on the Virginia. Majority of the users, I think 81% or 85%, like the idea of a permanent driver's license in Virginia. The vast majority of the people accepting it also supported the idea of a permanent driver's license. Don't know what they're willing to pay for it. What we do know is that they weren't willing to pay it per click. Don't know if they're willing to invest in the technology that they'd have to invest in, and the training and the maintenance and support, et cetera. But they're interested in permanent driver's licenses, and so that was largely the feedback from the proof of concept. I think, if I was to give one key takeaway from MDL for you guys, is that this isn't a question of technology. Technology to do mobile driver's license has been around for more than a decade. This is really a question about process and defining benefit in order to define value proposition and build a sustainable financial plan for MDL. And that's why it's so important for these pilots and proof of concepts for us to continue to build our learning on the MDL space. And I think any of you that are interested in MDL, talk to us, talk to the other guys that are in the space, and we'd be happy to share with you what we've learned so far. And if you're interested in continuing and helping build on that knowledge, we would be happy to engage in that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Steve. Any questions from the floor for either of them? There's a microphone coming for you. There's a mic. Yeah.
Thanks, Clay. This question is for either. I found it very interesting that Steve mentioned that the pilots so far had been seen the MDL as a supplemental to the permanent card. And also Jeff mentioned that. When I've worked for a jurisdiction, they've asked me the question about when will this replace my physical card and reduce the cost, because it's in addition to the current cost per card of the physical document. But the question that I was asked, and I've still never received an answer, if at some point down the road this replaces the physical document, how do in a roadside instance where someone is unconscious or deceased, typically the law enforcement officer retrieves the wallet or to verify it. How does the person provide implied consent at that point with an MDL? That's a question that I was asked, and I was never able to answer the question.
I think we'd both be happy to answer it. You want to start first? And then
So it's interesting. Can you hear me okay?
maybe we'll board the microphone.
Oh, it's being recorded. Sorry.
Oh, you got the microphone here, Steve.
So what's interesting is when you look at a new technology like a digital driver's license, mobile driver's license, people automatically assume that it's going to solve everything. The reality is that there is no DDL today, there is no MDL today, and there are processes that already exist currently for situations like that. What happens if I pass out or I'm on the side of the road and I don't have my driver's license with me? There are already processes that exist for that, and there's no reason that those processes need to change. So sometimes you wind up overthinking it, but these problems exist today, they'll exist tomorrow, they'll exist 10 years from now. And most times, whatever you're doing today is going to suffice what's going to happen 10 years from now.
Well, I would say it's slightly different because the incidence of an officer investigating a deceased or unconscious person at a roadside happens every 5 minutes. And people are required by law to carry their identification with them in the car. So the process is a little bit different in the fact that there is a way and means for them to identify the deceased or unconscious person. There is not when the only thing they have is a mobile device that requires that person's consent to open the device, or physical biometric. But I just thought maybe that as the standards are being developed, I've never seen anything that would address that.
This is just another example of where we're still trying to understand the use cases and build this thing out. What I will add, and that's an important use case, what I will add is that in the Standards Committee, Apple and Google have both joined. And this is certainly something that needs to be added or considered by the jurisdictions and by those that are designing the solutions and working with the other people that are involved in designing the solutions, such as the operating system providers. But it's certainly an important use case, and it's just another example of we have a lot more to still understand in this space before we develop something that's going to be ready to fully replace the physical license.
Fellow in the back, then we'll come to you, sir.
Just a question. So I've tried to go as electronic as I can with all of my different cards and things like this, and bank cards and MasterCards and Visas. One of the frustrating things that I'm finding, and I don't know if there's been thought any of this, is record keeping of all those. So not if this thing held lotto tickets and healthcare information when I attended my doctor's office. Perhaps prescriptions could go on this thing. Not, obviously anything law enforcement related, because it's not my business who the police officer was that stopped me. If I had a problem, I'll deal with it then or something. But I think there needs to be some thought around that, because there's no place to keep receipt records of all this stuff, and yet we're in this electronic age. And I find that really frustrating, why I still need to take a paper receipt from certain things and keep it with me. So, just a thought.
I think there was a couple of things you talked about there that is worth talking about. This whole idea of logging and auditing use of the driver's license is a bit of a controversial topic, because some people are going to like the idea of how my identification is being used and who's accessing it, in order to allow them to understand where their information is being asserted to. On the other side, you can see the thought that, well, hold on, I don't want anyone to know where my identity is being used, or I don't want particular parties, such as the government, to know where the information is being used. And so, the notion of logging is an interesting topic. I think ultimately it needs to come down to the user. Privacy in the electronic age is all about putting the person in control of their information and putting them and empowering them to decide what information they're sharing and with whom and under what conditions. On top of that, there is a number of technologies that also help with privacy enhancements that can be used. But that's a great question, and it's one that certainly is being considered.
So once you have the application on the phone, once someone opens the application and can see the ID, what's the status of the rest of the information on the telephone? Is it protected beyond requiring another password to get into the phone proper with all your personal records, or do they just see the DMV at that point? The DDL, sorry.
Well, there is a I guess I can't speak for everyone, but in the application that we were showing, is that there is a special PIN code or fingerprint to establish or authenticate yourself to the application itself. So it would be in addition to what you do if you have a password on your phone when you have a screensaver on and you unlock it using your PIN. There would be an additional step in order for you to trigger your DDL.
If I can. This is another example where it's not just our industry that needs to be involved in developing the MDL or working with other people. The ability to lock down an operating system and prevent other data popping up on the screen when you're trying to display your license QR code or anything else is outside our capability. It's really down to the operating system providers, and why, and hence the importance of all of them being involved as part of the conversation in developing the solution.
Well, I'm thinking of that case that took place in California a couple of years ago with the couple of terrorists. Police went to great lengths to try and open up that telephone for good reason. Now, in this particular scenario, they had digital identification. Could police have been able to get the data they wanted off that phone by getting through to this digital driver's license and then into the rest of the phone? Or is there still a layer there?
There's a layer there. In that particular case, that was the operating system that locked them out. So today, in order to use, in all the, as far as I know, all of the pilots, it's an application that's inside the authorization of the phone's authentication already. So you have to authenticate to the phone and then go in and use it. Now, you know, is that a perfect world? Well, if you look at the mobile payment space, you know, mobile payment options have existed for 10 years. And it isn't until Apple Pay that came along that really kind of started to see some drive there. And it's partly because it's now implemented in a way that's easy to use. I don't have to authenticate inside to the operating system. So anyway, did that answer your question?
I think we have time for a couple more questions, and please make your remarks using the microphone because it's being recorded and there's simultaneous translation for those who don't understand English or French. Thank you.
Sure. So my question is there any tie-ins to vehicle registration at all for mobile DL to then do identification of the driver, or no?
That we've definitely seen interest in doing that. It's not currently being piloted, at least in our pilot, but we've had jurisdictions who have talked to us about wanting to try to do that, and that's something that we're considering in the future.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you all for your participation, and I hope you enjoyed the session. If you've downloaded the annual meeting app, we invite you to rate and provide feedback directly through the app. You can also do so by clicking on the session's description. This session is being videotaped, and for all the educational sessions are being videotaped. So they will be available to you within a few weeks of the annual meeting for viewing on the YouTube channel of CCMTA. Delegates will receive an email with a link to these educational sessions once they are online. We look forward to seeing all of you at the reception, the 5 to 7 reception. It's going to start in a few minutes at 5 o'clock. But please remember to return your devices to where you got them from so that you don't get charged for them. Okay. Thank you very much. But before you go, I would like to extend CCMTA's appreciation to our speakers with a token of small token. If you could help me. Thank you all.